what you have to do is stop thinking about the end. You got to stop thinking about when it's going to be over or when you're going to be done, because you know you can't get there. So what you got to do is just do the next right thing.
Welcome to Champions Mojo Weekly Podcast with your hosts, Kelly Pallas and Maria Parker. You'll hear authentic, entertaining stories with tips, lessons, and wisdom from champions to inspire, motivate, and educate you. You'll get the tools you need for becoming a true champion in your own life. And now, your host, Kelly Pallas.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Champions Mojo Podcast, where today we are going to be talking about reaching that huge goal, but it's going to be broken down into small steps. So we've really got some exciting stuff that is going to help us all achieve goals that just seem overwhelming. So, Maria, it's great to see you today. How are you?
I am doing great, and I'm excited to talk about something that I think people don't really understand in terms of reaching really, really big goals. So I'm excited for our podcast today.
Me too. So when we think about really big goals, so we're talking about things that seem overwhelming. And there are many, many ways to approach this. And let's just throw them out here. So we hear the saying, you can eat a whole elephant one bite at a time. That's one of our favorite ones that you and I have thrown around. Right. What's your penny in the jar one? Or
yeah, this actually came from you and you don't remember. But,
I don't remember.
But one time, a long time ago, you told me a story about imagine a big glass jar, and each workout, for instance, or each thing that you do, you put 1 penny in. Well, 1 penny doesn't make a lot of difference, but if you put that penny in every day, eventually that jar is going to be full. So when I think about one little thing that I'm doing to reach my goal, I think, oh, that's another penny in the jar, because it can seem like doing one little thing isn't really moving you forward. And imagine a big empty jar that you're putting pennies in day to day. Doesn't look like much is happening. But, as you continue putting those pennies in over weeks and months, then eventually you can start to see some progress. So I love the concept of penny in the jar. And I've told that story to everybody I ever work out with. Anybody who's ever doing anything hard, I talk about the penny in the jar, and they're like, what are you talking about? And you don't even remember.
Yeah, I think it's coming back to me now. So, yeah, I do know that, and I think that's really valuable, because when we get overwhelmed with big goals, we just think that we can't do it. And it can be anything from a real goal, a goal that you set, or even something that life just throws at you. Like, I'm not going to be able, or you think, oh my gosh, I am not going to be able to do this. And this isn't the story I'm going to tell, because we're trying on these podcasts to tell, we say we could tell 3 or 4 stories for each thing that we're talking about, but yes. This one that recently comes to mind was moving my parents out of the house they'd been in for 30 years.
Oh my gosh, I was in that house. It was packed floor to ceiling with mostly photographs.
Yeah,
it was really Kelly's mom was a historian, and she loved her kids and grandkids, and she had 30,000 pictures, some enormous number of photos and photo albums, not to mention all of the things that she loved from her mother and her mother's mother, so that the house was full. And the idea of emptying out that house would be overwhelming to anyone.
Yes, we called it the museum. Yeah. And even though, it was not hoarder status, but it literally, and she kept it quite beautiful, but once, she passed away and Dad went into assisted living, it was just, the only daughter, it fell on me. So I felt like that was eating an elephant.
That was definitely
one bite
an elephant
at a time.
That was definitely an elephant.
Yeah, so,
because it wasn't just the stuff, but it was the stuff. It was emotionally laden stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like all of, you could go in there and clean out somebody's house, but these were things that Mom, who had just died, was attached to.
Yes.
And furniture, beautiful things that every time you touch them, you must have had an emotional reaction to.
Yeah. So I think that's what I'm saying. We have goals that we want to hit. Like, you and I, obviously, you had tremendous cycling goals. I had tremendous swimming goals. And those were things that I wanted to get to that were super hard, but then life throws you things like clearing out your parents' house or maybe getting through an illness or whatever. So I feel like that the discussion we're going to have today will really help people break down into little steps and not focus on it. So we were brainstorming the title of this show today, and what did we come up with?
We said achieving your goals by not looking at them.
I loved it. Yeah. Achieving your goals by not looking at them. So this is just, a little different take. So I want to take this time today to drill down on your RAAM race, because talk about, starting in Oceanside, California, and knowing that your finish line is in Annapolis, Maryland. Again, I've joked that I couldn't even do that in a car in 11 days, and you did it on a bike. So tell us about not looking at the goal.
Yes, that is how I was able to finish. Finishing Race Across America in 2013 was the most difficult and probably my highest athletic achievement of my life. So it's a huge goal, and like any huge goal, it was really inspiring when I was thinking about it and planning for it. I was imagining myself in Annapolis, Maryland, as a victorious rider. When I was preparing for it, I had imagined it, I visualized it. I had a very clear and concrete goal. I wanted to finish the race. I wanted to finish in a certain number of days, and so I did all the things that you do when you set goals, and we'll talk about that probably in another episode. But when I was actually doing it, like so many things, it was so much tougher than I anticipated it would be. And
can you talk about that
Sure.
toughness? Because, I obviously know you deeply and well over all the years and followed you closely on RAAM, and it's still such an amazing story. Can you just talk about, when we're talking about overcoming something so hard, like some of just the pain and the agony and the struggle of what that looks like, on a day-to-day basis, like the various terrains and temperatures
Right.
and
Okay. So Race Across America it's a one-stage race, meaning when the gun goes off in California, in Oceanside, the first person to get to Annapolis wins. And what that really means is that anytime that you're off the bike because you're sleeping or eating or taking care of yourself, you're not moving forward. So what ends up happening is you spend a lot of time on the bike, and you become very sleep deprived and often very uncomfortable. Maybe you're nauseated. Maybe you're imagine spending 11 days pretty much outside all the time with very, very little sleep. Most people who do Race Across America average less than 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. So, and when you're not sleeping, it's not like you're sitting around or at a restaurant, you're riding your bike. Pretty much you're riding your bike for 20 to 21 hours a day, and you're racing. And so it's one of those things, everybody who comes to the RAAM starting line has to spend quite a bit of money. You have to have a crew. It's a big operation. So you don't come to the RAAM starting line not planning on finishing it. You have to qualify. To qualify, you have to do 400 miles on your bike in less than 24 hours. So qualifying is no small feat.
which you did 470.
Right. I was able to do more than that.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought I was pretty much tough stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought I was prepared. But I also knew going in that 50% of the people who start Race Across America, RAAM, do not finish. And every one of those people had to qualify. So every one of them had done, something like what I'd done. So when I thought about that, I would get, a little nickel of
Right.
worry.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't take long after I started RAAM before I fell apart. Everything fell apart. I was nauseated. You have to go over a mountain range and through the desert the first basically 36 hours. And turns out that I don't do very well in heat. And I was nauseated. I was throwing up. I was just miserable.
You were sunburned.
I
You
was
were falling
sunburned.
asleep on your bike.
Yeah.
You
had
rubs, right?
Right,
Like
yeah,
terrible
just right.
body rubs.
Right.
And what about the desert with the lung infection? Talk
right.
about that.
And at one point, yes, I developed an asthma, which I had never in my life had asthma, but basically you breathe in all this dust in the desert, and then you have a reaction to it.
I know that's the aspergillus germ. That's my old pharmaceutical sales rep.
Oh, no,
so I know
really?
Yeah, they
I did not know that.
Pfizer sold a drug for aspergillus, which comes from the sand in the desert. So anyway,
I didn't know that.
That's
Anyway,
why when I heard that you had it, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got aspergillus.
I had no idea. I was not prepared for that. People told me, oh, cover your mouth in the desert.
And you even wore a bandana,
And I
right?
wore a bandana, some of it, but not as much as I probably should have. I got out of the desert and I literally could not breathe. So after you get out of the desert, the first thing you're doing is doing this tremendous climbing over the Rockies. And so I was just like, what the heck? I've never had asthma. What the heck is happening to me? I couldn't breathe. And somebody who was in the crew gave me an inhaler, and I took a puff on that. I was like, okay, this is, there's something going on with my lungs, and this is fixing it. It must be some kind of a lung infection. And I literally coughed for 3 days. I remember, getting out of over the mountains and into the flatlands of Colorado, of eastern Colorado, just coughing. I stopped for a couple of hours, and I literally was coughing so much that one of my crew members said she thought I was going to die because I was just coughing. So anyway, these are stories to tell you that this is tough, and someday I'll write a book about it, and you can read sort of the more gory details if you're interested.
I would love that. I would love that because I love the picture that you're painting of just this. Every single, everybody knows that I suffered through the skin condition, and which is your largest organ, but you had sunburn all over your skin. You had bites. You had
nausea.
lung,
the worst for me was the nausea, throwing up, not being able to hold food down, because here you are, exercising for 21 hours a day, and I was literally just
couldn't hold your food.
I couldn't hold any food. It was all I could do to get water. It got better that part got better as I went along. But there were every day. I did it in 11 days and 18 hours. And every day had a new challenge that I hadn't thought of before. Bad traffic, rocky roads. There was 10 miles in one section that hadn't been paved, and they'd done that scraping thing that they do right before they paved. And it was just like, it was just torture at times. And so you can imagine that I had, and also sleep deprived. So when you're sleep deprived, you're kind of crazy. And so you can imagine that it became very, very difficult to go on. And in another show, we'll talk about the biggest challenge I had, which was that when we were in Arizona, my follow vehicle was hit and totaled, and my son was in it, and he was injured. Anyway, that's another story. But
we did talk about that.
We did talk about that rest and relaxation.
In the rest and relaxation, where you did get out and rest.
I basically had to be off the bike. Well, I didn't have to be. I ended up being off the bike for 24 hours, and that made a big difference. But beyond that, there was a time, there was a section where, there was every single day when I would start, after my little 3-hour break, I would cry for the first 45 minutes.
I remember that. One of my favorite stories of you crying was that it was Lucia that went in to wake you up. And she had cleaned your outfit that you'd worn the day before, and you were so sleep deprived and, as you said, so crazy that you cried because you didn't want to wear the same outfit.
I don't want to wear the green one. Why do I have to wear the green one?
That is just so beautiful. And so
I have 3 colors. Why do I have to wear the green one again?
Yeah. So we've really painted a picture here of just looking at Annapolis, Maryland, in the middle of the mountains when you've got asthma and you're in this condition.
Right.
Did you look at Annapolis, or what did you do?
So that became, and I think I want everybody to put themselves, not in this situation, but sometime in your life where you have felt overwhelmed, where you got into something, or life threw you something, cancer or illness or something, and you thought, I cannot do this. I cannot get through this. And this is today's lesson or theme. And this made a huge difference for me in Race Across America and in everything I've ever done that got hard. What you have to do is stop thinking about the end. You got to stop thinking about when it's going to be over or when you're going to be done, because you can't get there. So what you got to do is just do the next right thing. And so in Race Across America, this is how it looked for me. I would be climbing a hill or a mountain, and I would think, I cannot get to the top. I know this is a 7-mile climb, and I am exhausted, and I cannot do this. Sometimes I would feel pretty good, but often I was just really, really struggling. And so what I did was I thought, I'm not going to look at the top of this hill. I'm going to look just far enough ahead that I know I can get there. So for me, it was, I call it mailbox to mailbox. I'd be on this country road, and there'd be a mailbox, and maybe it would be 10 yards ahead. And I'd think, all right, I'm not going to look at the top of the hill. I'm not going to think about the goal. I'm just going to get to that mailbox. And I'd ride and I'd cycle to that mailbox because I knew I could get to the mailbox. I could see the mailbox. And when I get to that mailbox, I get that little burst of like, hey, I did it. That was a tiny little goal, and I did it. And that would give me courage to go to the next mailbox or crack in the road or shrub or whatever it was. And I think that, and pretty soon, you're at the top of the hill. And then, you got another hill to climb or another challenge. But what works for me is making sure that whatever it is, whatever goal it is, when I'm overwhelmed and I am discouraged, is something I know I can do. And for some of us, and for me even sometimes, if I've got something hard to do, it might even be just getting out of bed and putting my feet on the floor. Or it might be I've got a tough phone call to make that I'm intimidated by. It might be just looking up the phone number and writing it down. Or it might be just, I'm going to dial it and then I'll hang up. Whatever it is, it has to be something that you can do. And if you do that, then you get a little, every time you do what you say to yourself that you're going to do, then that's a victory.
Yes.
And,
no matter how small.
I mean, this is a very commonly used, it's in all of our sort of our culture. Think about AA, one step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Do the next right thing. You've heard these expressions, but you really have to be deliberate and intentional about thinking, what is the one thing that I know I can do to keep me moving in the right direction?
The easiest thing sometimes. Sometimes it's just, you think to achieve that goal, it's got to be something hard. Like, it's got to be something disciplined.
Right.
It's got to be, but it really, truly, and you and I have had little touches of depression throughout our lives.
Sure.
And
Everybody, I think, has.
just think the key to getting out of even depression is that just today I'm just going to put my feet on the floor and I'm going to wash my face, and then I can go back to bed. The next day I put my feet on the floor, I wash my face, and I take a shower, and then I go back to bed. And then you just get those little tiny victories. But back to your analogy of being overwhelmed. I think in today's society we all have a lot on our plates. We're all overwhelmed. And yes, definitely, I am a true believer in mindset and picturing you at the end of picturing yourself at the end of that race, wearing the crown of flowers and having your arms in the air as the victor, which you were. And yet sometimes you can't do that. You just, like, I didn't know what it was going to look like at the end of my parents' house being emptied.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know that it was going to end up being beautifully painted and staged and sold and, like this gorgeous picture, because I just didn't, there was no role modeling for that.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we do. The light shining, you only need one stair, one light on one stair to get to the top. You don't need to see the whole 25 stairs ahead. Just do that one thing. So
I think that's really true. When Jenny was, my sister Jenny, who died of brain cancer, we used to say, Jenny, the only light is the next step in front of you. Do not look down the road. So that's so true. The next step, I love that. The next stair, and most of us can think, oh yeah, we can do one stair.
Yeah, one stair, and
Kelly, I think you have stories too.
Yeah,
can you give us a story?
I love the mailbox to mailbox, and I know that you even have given speeches on that at 20-minute speeches. So I think bringing, I was trying to think what story I wanted to tell today, because obviously I have plenty of buoy to buoy stories of swimming 10 miles and make it to this buoy, and that same thing, landmark, when you talked about mailbox to mailbox, and I think I've done some open water swims where I think, okay, I'm going to get to that dock and then that dock and then that, or
maybe
mountain,
it's just
and then,
10 strokes or
10
whatever.
strokes or whatever. But I think the one that really is, that can apply, where we're taking this principle of applying the techniques of athletes to real life. And so in 2016, my story was, I was at U.S. Masters Nationals, and I was putting on my technical suit, which is very tight. And as I pulled it up over my arm, I felt a pretty significant lump in my left breast. And, at that point, I had plenty of swims to do. I thought, I'll think about that later. And we have zero history of breast cancer in our family. No woman that I know in our family or our history. So I just thought, it's not breast cancer. I just didn't even think of that. And athletes often have very dense, fibrous breast. And I've had those before where they're just a fibroadenoma. And I thought that's what it is. And, kept a positive attitude. And then I literally could have fallen out of my chair when that doctor said to me, you have an invasive ductal carcinoma. And I was like, what is that? Is that breast cancer? It was kind of like I couldn't even grasp that. So it wasn't a goal to really get healed from breast cancer. It was just this big thing that was thrown in front of me, and to the small steps. So I went to role modeling somebody that I knew was a swimmer, that I knew had been through breast cancer. And so it ended up, being breast cancer. So Arlene Delmage, who's a great friend of mine, and she recovered from breast cancer and went on to win, lots of masters races. And so I called her, and I remember literally trembling, like I'd just gotten the diagnosis, and I was crying, and I was actually staying at my parents' house because I was helping my mom back when she'd already gone well into Alzheimer's, so she couldn't support me.
Right.
She wasn't there, and I was locked in the guest room, which you stayed there, and I dialed Arlene's phone number, and she's 3 hours west, so 3 hours earlier. And so I said, Arlene, I've got breast cancer. And she said, okay, you're going to be fine. She said, just do the next thing. She said, do not think about anything else. So what's next? I said, I got to get an MRI. And I don't want to get an MRI. She's like, honey, it's not painful. Just go do your MRI. That's it. That's all you see. Just go do your MRI. And what do you have to do after that? Well, I think I got to have a biopsy of my lymph nodes. And she's like, okay, we're not thinking about the biopsy of your lymph nodes. Let's just do your MRI. And then, so that's what I did. I really just broke it down into one step at a time, instead of thinking, what is this going to look like? Am I going to have double mastectomy and reconstructive surgery, or is it in all my lymph nodes and I'm going to die?
It's not like you didn't think about those things.
I didn't think about those things. I literally just thought, in fact, I remember my MRI, the nurse saying, just have a good time with whatever you're doing. Just stay in that present moment. And for my MRI, I invited my brother Steve to take me to my MRI. And if you know him, he teased me all growing up and was, loved to see me being tortured, but just joking. He's a great big brother. And so he took off work, he went with me, and he was just so loving and supportive. And we actually laughed and had a good time. And I remember just getting through it and thinking, well, that was a piece of cake. And I took that step by step each time. And you drove 14 hours to go through the breast cancer surgery with me, and sat there, and post-surgery, even though I was totally out of it, we had some great conversations.
We did.
I think I slept through the meal afterwards. But
that's right. We went out to a restaurant.
And I think I was sitting
lunch
straight up, and I heard you guys talking. It was it was post anesthesia, and I heard you guys talking, and I remember I was eating something, and I remember we were laughing about something, but it all turned out so much better than I could have possibly imagined. I had ended up having the two lumpectomy, so I had the 2 lumps out, and they got clean margins, and then they took out 3 lymph nodes, which didn't have any cancer, and I was back in the pool in 3 weeks. So if I had just run wild with terrible scenarios, I ended up saying, I've had worse flus, and that's terrible to say, but you get that cancer diagnosis and you think, oh my God, my life's over. But for me, it was really manageable because of the small steps. So
do you have specific, how did you, because I know that you occasionally had moments where you felt overwhelmed by it. So how did you, I want to sort of to help people, like, how do you go for that moment when you feel the overwhelm, you feel the fear, or whatever it is that you're dealing with, to saying, no, I'm not going to go there? Was that just a disciplined step? I'm not going to go there. I mean, how did do you remember, did you call somebody and say, help?
Yes, I definitely use the helpline I think that's always a good thing is talking to somebody. If I was scared, I would just be vulnerable and just say, call somebody and say, I'm really scared. This is really scaring me. And yeah, so I think that is part of it. And I think being like, I know you and I talked about this earlier, and it's one of those other kind of known theories out there. But one of the things that I did during that time is I created a website called Swimming Through Breast Cancer.
That's
because
right.
I just thought, and I went into forums to help other people. I just thought, when something is really bothering me, and this is maybe another show, we're veering off a little bit, but we can get back on track about small steps, is that somebody's going through something worse. And so when you're so down into your own pit, if you kind of say, somebody's in a deeper pit and can I help them?
Right.
So I think often I would just take my own, stop looking at my navel and just say, what can I do to help? And that's part of the charity work that we do. I might think people going through red skin syndrome are, believe it or not, in much worse condition than I was with breast cancer.
Right.
I mean, they're miserable. So I would go into the forums with red skin syndrome, and I would,
try to encourage
people. So that was part of it.
That's good. I mean, I think that's a really excellent point. So sometimes we have goals and we get overwhelmed and we need to break it down and just do, the next right thing. But sometimes the next right thing is calling for help. And sometimes the next right thing is giving help.
Yeah.
So, I think
great.
that's a really beautiful story about saying, okay, I don't want to fixate on my breast cancer. I am going to use this energy that I have right now, which comes from fear maybe.
Right.
And I'm going to really try to reach out. And one of the things that we also, Kelly and I have also talked about is that we can become overwhelmed by, so there's, like Kelly said, there's our goals that we set for ourselves, which are good things. And then there's sometimes things that just life hits us and we have to get through it. But there's almost always grace for the moment, for the next moment. There's not grace for the whole thing. There's not grace for everything, but there's grace for the moment. So whatever the next thing is, and I found this on RAAM, I found this in going through your breast cancer with you, going through difficulties in my marriage, watching my children struggle, that if you can anticipate trouble, but if you just say, okay, right now, in this moment, there's something good. And that was certainly, we found that with your breast cancer. We laughed a lot.
We did.
We laughed a lot. There was so much beauty and love, as awful as breast cancer is. And my sister died from brain cancer, and I can tell you there was so many beautiful moments. Cancer has many, many gifts. There were so many beautiful moments with her family, with their kids, so much laughter. That doesn't take away the loss or the difficulties of it, but you can get through it. If you don't go try to take the whole thing at once. So whatever your goal is or whatever your difficulty is that you're in, don't look at whatever it is that overwhelms you.
Yeah, and Maria, I think this really ties into the message of today, which is that if you have a goal and it's a big goal, you sometimes just take your eye off that final destination and you do the small steps.
Right.
And so sometimes I think when you apply that, so if you have an athletic goal and it's big, but then you have a goal in life, like life just hits you with something, then your goal becomes getting through that big something. So it's really very much a parallel. And I will also say that I love your grace thing. I mean, I think I want to talk about that a little bit more, because that has been, you and I started this podcast because we have been each other's coaches and voices, and we've just it's like we've just raised each other up and achieve, raise because we've coached each other. And that point that you've always told me about my anxiety, that whatever, I'm worried about something, whatever that is in the future, and you're like, whatever, when you get there, there's going to be grace. And I love that for a step. That can be a small step of thinking about grace, of thinking, I have to go through this, but my step is going to be to embrace the grace. Right. So I love that part of it.
Right. There is often something good and beautiful or funny, or even in, we all know that sometimes the way to get through something is just black humor. It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
I can't believe this is happening. But I think if we're climbing out of, I think there's two ways to think about this. There's climbing a mountain to achieve
Right.
something wonderful,
Yes.
and then there's climbing out of a pit.
Right,
And we've all
right.
been in pits,
Yes.
and we've all tried to climb
Right.
mountains.
And that's a great bike analogy, because sometimes you're going down the hill.
Yeah. So,
That's
I think
beautiful.
the idea of climbing a mountain is when you get to the top, things are going to be better, that you're going to have achieved something. And we all need goals, and we need dreams. And, I think Kelly and I both have a goal to help people. And, that's a big thing, and it's very general, but, that's a mountain.
Right,
And,
right.
so how are we going to do that? And each of us have chosen sort of different ways, and then we're doing this podcast together. But then there are times when, as we've said, that life hits you with something, and nobody gets through life without pain, loss, grief, hardship. And that's a hole. And usually you're
Right.
not looking for the holes and you don't expect them, but we all have
Right.
them. And so how do you get out of the hole? Well, you just do the next thing that you can do.
Yes.
And the bigger and harder and steeper, I would say, the slope is, the smaller the thing that you have to do. This is so true. If you have something really, really tough, whatever it is, the loss of a loved one, and maybe it's just opening your eyes, or like we said, putting your feet on the floor, or washing your face, or maybe it's picking up the phone and calling somebody. That can seem hard. Maybe it's just walking to the phone. The harder it is, the deeper the hole, the steeper the slope, the smaller the thing. But then once you do that, you need to say, yes, I did that, and then build on that.
Okay, I got to pull out the bike gears here, because
Okay.
being a cyclist,
That's right.
That's
Sure.
so. It's such a great analogy that when you're going up a steep hill on a bike, you're in your tiniest little gear.
Yeah.
You're just that's oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is just so
That is.
perfect.
You're right.
because,
That's beautiful.
Like when you're going straight up a
I'm
hill,
glad you
you're
pointed
just
that
your
out.
small, tiny
Right,
little gear.
your feet are racing
You're
around,
racing
and
around, and it makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
So if you're in the big gear and you're trying to crank that
Right.
pedal around because you're in that gigantic gear,
Right.
you're going to fall off your bike.
right.
So that is a really great point, that it's just the bigger, harder things are just small. And our next show is going to be about dealing with that real pain, the pain of, dealing with pain. So I can't wait to talk about that. So we can go even deeper on this subject. And the one thing we're gonna add, starting with today's show, is some action item that our listeners can take to get the big goal by doing the little tiny things. So what action item, you're going to give them an action item from the
Okay.
Maria Parker camp.
Okay.
And I'm going to give them an action item because, as we've said, people who love us and know us, or know us and love us, say that we
know us at least.
know us and love us. They have to know us, right? That they say we have different voices.
Right,
We
we
have, that's what makes it so cool. So what piece of, like, an action item, somebody's out there listening and they're going through, they're either going for the mountain or they're coming out of the pit.
Right.
What is their action item from you?
I think that the thing that's going to be the most helpful is having clarity about what one thing you can do. I think one of the problems is we get overwhelmed by overwhelm, and we don't know what to do, so we don't even think about it. We just allow ourselves to stay in the pit or stay in the cloud. And so I think the action item that I would give you for achieving your goal or getting out of your pit is think to yourself, okay, what is the very next thing that I should do, can do, and can do? And don't give yourself something that you can't do. Give yourself something that you know you can do, that's going to be a success. And however small that is, think about what it is, and then do it. And then and then remind yourself to celebrate, like we've talked about say, okay, I did that. That's my action item. What's yours, Kelly?
I love it. Yeah, mine would be very similar, as we always have similarities, but then diverge in some areas. I really believe in the power of putting a pen on a paper. In fact, I just got in the mail a brand new planner. I know it's old school, and I keep a lot of stuff, on my Google Calendar and it's electronic, but I still believe in hitting a pen on a paper and looking at that. And so I would say an action item would be to write down, and it's the same clarity, write down what would give you a victory. And if it's making your bed tomorrow morning, and that's it, that's your small step, then write it down. Tomorrow I'm going to make my bed. Just whatever it is. Or if it's, like you said, you got to make a hard phone call. Well, you're not going to make the call, but you're going to find the number.
Right.
You're going to find who's the person that I need to talk to.
Right.
And, I know that sometimes we worry about our health, or we don't take care of our health enough, and exercise is something that we're going to do a whole many shows on exercise. But let's say, your goal, somebody's out there listening, and we all need to treat our body, move our body, get in shape, do exercise. So if someone has a goal to get in shape, that's just an overwhelming goal. That's like saying climb to the top of the mountain. What mountain? Where? The east, the west?
How do I
get in shape. How do you start that? So the very first thing, maybe just, I'm going to find some athletic clothes in my closet.
There you go.
I'm just going to find something to wear.
Right.
That's your first goal. You do that tomorrow, you're done. That's your day.
Right. I like it.
At least write it down. And and then I would say, so put one goal a day for 3 days and see if you can have 3 days in a row. And then, that's like the batting average. So you hit 3 times.
And I would say make sure every one of those is goals that you can achieve. So if you can find some clothes for your workout, then maybe the next goal is to put them on.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have early successes, especially if you're deep in the pit or on the steep side of the mountain. Make sure that these are goals that in your heart of hearts, no matter what, you can achieve them, because we need to have successes. And don't think, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard. I'm not like those other people. Just do the very next thing that that you can do that will move you in the right direction.
I love it. So, Maria, anything else today for our listeners on just, what was it that you started on saying? Don't look at the big goal and you'll still get it. I love the way you said it.
Yeah. Succeed by not looking at your goals.
I love it. I think that's an original. I think we need to copy that.
We could say succeed by not looking at your goals, or succeed by not looking at your problems.
Yeah.
Just do the next right thing. This has been super fun talking about. But if there's anybody out there who's discouraged or overwhelmed, break it down. Just do the next right thing. The next step. I love the next step in the staircase.
Yep. All right. Well, that will be a wrap on this.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Our quote of the week comes from Vincent van Gogh. Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together.
We are so grateful that you spent this time with us today, and we hope that you heard something that inspired, motivated, and educated you. Please see below for our copy of the show notes for any links or important information referenced here. Signing off for myself and champion co-host Kelly Pallas, we hope you'll join us again soon, and we know you can be a champion. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Champions Mojo podcast, designed to make you feel inspired, motivated, and educated. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Also visit championsmojo.com to learn more.